Welcome to this edition of Scripture and Cinema, a look at Bible lessons and their application through some of Hollywood's best known and some not so well known films. And before we get started into this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe bar right there. And then when the notification bell pops up, click on it and you'll be notified anytime I add content to the channel. Now, I have to begin with a spoiler alert. I might give away some key elements in the plot that will give away the ending in this edition of Scripture and Cinema, where we will be looking at Murder on the Orient Express, filmed in France and released in the United States in 1974, with an all-star cast including Sean Connery, Michael York, John Gielgud, Jean-Pierre Cassel, Jacqueline Bisset, Martin Balsam, and Anthony Perkins. Based on Dame Agatha Christie's 1934 best-selling novel of the same name, Murder on the Orient Express tells the story of Christie's famous detective Hercule Poirot, who at the last minute must book passage on the Orient Express to hurry back to London from Istanbul, Turkey. While traveling through the Balkans, the train is trapped by an avalanche. While awaiting someone to dig them out of the snowfall, one of the passengers is discovered murdered, and Poirot is asked to immediately start an investigation. Now, Dame Agatha Christie's 1934 novel about the kidnapping and murder of the toddler Daisy Armstrong was inspired by the real-life 1932 kidnapping and murder of Charles A. Lindbergh, Jr., the son of the famous aviator, from their New Jersey home. Eventually, Bruno Richard Hauptmann was arrested, tried, convicted, and executed for the crime. That was a trial that at the time was proclaimed the crime of the century, and whose outcome is controversial to this day due to questions about Hauptmann's guilt as well as procedures that were carried out during the trial. Now, the 1974 film almost didn't get made. Dame Agatha initially refused to sell the film rights to any more of her books, but EMI chairman Nat Coleman enlisted the aid of Lord Louis Mountbatten, uncle to His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and consort to Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain. Lord Mountbatten persuaded Dame Christie to allow the filming of her 1934 novel. Despite her dislike of the makeup department's job on Monsieur Poirot's mustache, this particular production turned out to be her favorite film adaptation of any of her books. Now, there's a reason that Lord Mountbatten was enlisted to plead the case for making the film. The film's co-producer, John Bradbourne, was his son-in-law. Directed by Sidney Lumet and featuring an all-star cast headed up by Albert Finney as Agatha Christie's famous Belgian detective Hercule Poirot, and including Ingrid Bergman, who won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in the role of Greta Olson, the film was a critical and a box office hit. According to the Internet Movie Database, 84-year-old Agatha Christie attended the movie premiere in November of 1974 and stated that she felt Albert Finney's performance came closest to her idea of Poirot. The premiere would be her final public appearance as she died 14 months later on January the 12th, 1976. On the second night of the journey from Istanbul to Calais, France, one of the passengers, a Mr. Samuel Ratchet, is murdered in his sleep. The crime is discovered the next morning when Mr. Ratchet's butler attempts to waken him. Upon the discovery of the murder, Signor Bianchi, a passenger on the train who also happens to be a director of the company which owns the Orient Express, asks his good friend Hercule Poirot to investigate and have a solution to give to the authorities once the train is freed from its snowbound trap. As Hercule Poirot starts his investigation, it is discovered that Mr. Samuel Ratchet is not who he claims to be. As it turns out, Ratchet's real name is Cassetti, and he is the wanted murderer of young Daisy Armstrong. Hercule Poirot interviews each of the passengers in the Calais coach, and it becomes apparent that each of the passengers has a connection to the aforementioned Daisy Armstrong and her family. After concluding his investigation, Poirot gathers the passengers in the dining car to present his solution. He has formulated two possible scenarios to explain the murder. The first, which he calls the simple solution, is based on several clues suggesting that Cassetti's murder was the result of a mafia feud. Poirot analyzes his second solution, referring to it as the more complex of the two, according to which every suspect has a link to the Armstrong case, thus having sufficient motive for the murder, which legally is nothing more than an act of revenge. When Poirot finishes his explanation, everyone is silent. Poirot suggests Bianchi should choose which explanation they present to the police. After all, he is the director of the company. So which is he going to present, the simple or the complex one? Bianchi decides that the simple solution will be more than enough to satisfy the police, and that Ratchet deserved everything that he got. Poirot agrees with the decision, and he departs to prepare his report for the Yugoslav police, even though he admits he will struggle with his conscience. The train becomes free of the snow and leaves the passengers to celebrate at the outcome of the investigation. Now, as the film ends, passengers enjoy champagne and toast their success at killing a killer. Now, while it is arguable that Cassetti, or Ratchet, whichever name you prefer, got what he deserved, there are some biblical lessons we can learn from this. First, Ratchet seemed to escape justice on Earth, as no law enforcement agency caught up to him. And that does happen. There are thousands or probably millions of unsolved crimes throughout history. But 2 Peter chapter 2, beginning in verse 4, we're told, "For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example of those who would afterwards live ungodly. And delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked, for that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day, by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. Then the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust under punishment for the day of judgment, and especially those who walk according to the flesh in the lust of uncleanliness, and despise authority. They are presumptuous, self-willed, they are not afraid to speak evil of dignitaries, whereas angels who are greater in power and might do not bring a reviling accusation against them before the Lord." Peter's telling us that God is going to take care of those who continue on in sin arrogantly, which is what Cassetti did, basically, because he thought he got away with this crime. A second lesson we can gain from this is that your sin will find you out. Despite law enforcement not getting him, Ratchet paid for his crime. In Numbers chapter 32, Moses told the people of Israel, "If you do this thing, if you arm yourselves before the Lord for war, and all your armed men cross over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven out his enemies from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then afterward you may return and be blameless before the Lord and before Israel, and this land shall be your possession before the Lord. But if you do not do so, then take note, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. Build cities for your little ones and folds for your sheep, and do what has proceeded out of your mouth." And then we're also told in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 13, "Nothing in all creation is hidden from God. Everything is naked and exposed before his eyes, and he is the one to whom we are accountable." Sure, we may escape accountability for crimes, sins, unethical behavior, and other things here on this earth, but eventually we're going to stand before God. And as Moses told the people of Israel, our sin will find us out. In Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse 13, we see the next lesson, and that is that death can strike at any time. We never know when it's going to come looking for us. In this passage, Jesus is confronted by someone from the crowd saying, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist of the abundance of the things he possesses." Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, "The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, Well, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all of my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, You fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. There are several sermons right here in this passage alone. This cartoon from a tract called This Was Your Life by Jack T. Chick and published by Chick Publications illustrates what Jesus was saying. Here you have a man who's obviously got a nice car and home, and he thinks he's made it. But then, here comes death. It looks to me like he's had a heart attack, and he drops dead, because it is appointed unto men once to die, and then after this, the judgment. So to recap, it might look like some people escape justice on this earth, but ultimately nobody does. We all stand in the Supreme Court of God, a court for which there's only one lawyer admitted to practice law, and that's Jesus, and for which there is no appeal. Second, we will all pay a price for sin. Maybe we won't pay it in this life, but we stand before God and he says, Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness, I never knew you. And third, death is no respecter of people. Sure, we all want to live to a nice old age and die peacefully in our bed or in our sleep, but death is no respecter of people. It's not any respecter of your age, nationality, your religion, your race, or your social status. So it is always incumbent upon us and very necessary for us to be prepared to meet our Maker. You never know at what age or at what place it will happen. Well, that's it for this edition of Scripture and Cinema. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on that subscribe bar so you'll be notified when I add content to the channel. Feel free to comment in the comment section below. Give it a thumbs up if you like the video, and feel free to share this video with all the people in your social media networks. That's it for this edition. Thanks for watching.